Chair, I just want to quickly introduce two of my pages who are spending their spring break with me today. I have Cash and Charlie sitting here in the front row, one from Wichita, West Wichita, and one from Andell. Great gentlemen. Glad to have them here in the Capitol for the first time.
Would you guys stand, and welcome to the Tax Committee. Committee, I'm going to turn our attention to Senate Bill 539. We'll open the hearing. Thank you, Amelia. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Senate Bill number 539 relates to property tax, income tax, privilege tax, and sales and compensating use tax. To begin with property tax, Section 1 would amend 79201X to increase the extent of the exemption for residential property from the statewide school levy from the current, currently it reads $40,000. For this particular year, it's slightly higher than that, but it would increase the extent to $80,000 beginning in tax year 2024. The annual adjustment provision would remain, but would take effect in 2025. Relating to income tax, if you turn to Section 4, Section 4 shows that 7932.110 would be amended to provide individual income tax rates that decrease by 0.05%, beginning with 5.7%. For tax year 2024, it would decrease then until tax year 2029, where it would be at 5.45%, and it would continue at that percentage after 2029. Section 5 of the bill, also relating to income tax, would increase the income limit for the Social Security subtraction modification. It would increase that limit from $75,000 to $100,000. And it would also provide a formula to phase out the exemption between $100,000 and $125,000. That would begin with tax year 2024. Section 6 would amend 7932.119, which would increase the standard deduction for single individuals from the current $3,500 to $4,000 beginning with tax year 2024. It would also provide a cost of living adjustment for all of the filing statuses beginning in 2025. Section 7 would amend 7932.121 relating to the Kansas personal exemption. In this provision, beginning with tax year 2024, the Kansas personal exemption would go to $22,000 for married individuals filing a joint return, $11,000 for all other individuals filing a return, and an additional $3,000 for each dependent for which the taxpayer is entitled to a deduction for their federal income tax return. This provision would also include a cost of living adjustment that would begin in tax year 2025. And for your information, currently the personal exemption is $2,250 per exemption that is claimed on the federal tax return. Relating to privilege tax, the provisions in the bill, sections 2 and 3, would decrease the normal tax rates. Section 2 would amend 791107 to reduce the normal tax rate on banks to 1.94% for tax year 2025 and 1.63% for 2026 and thereafter. Section 3 would amend 791108 to reduce the normal tax rate on trust companies and savings and loan associations to 1.93 for 2025 and 1.16 for 2026 and thereafter. The bill does not change the surtax rates. And then relating to sales and compensating use taxes, Section 9 amends 793603D to reduce the state rate of sales tax on certain food and food ingredients to zero commencing on July 1st of 2024. Currently, it is scheduled by statute to go to zero beginning January 1 of 2025. There are also amendments in sections 8, 10, 11, and 12 that relate to the state highway fund that would increase their percentage to 18% beginning July 1st of 2024 instead of January 1st of 2025. And the bill would take effect from and after publication in the Register, and I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Committee, any questions? Senator Reddy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to know, is there a fiscal note to this?
There is a fiscal note. I think it was printed and put in your package. Did you see it, Senator Reddy?
I'm just not looking at it. Thank you.
That's fine, thank you. Committee, Senator Blasey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Am I reading this correctly on your reviser's supplemental note that the standard deduction increase is on Section 6 only for single filers? Is there anything for multi or joint filers?
Senator, there's not until the inflation factor kicks in. The first year, it's just for single filers, and then there's an inflation factor that kicks in after that. Amelia, yes.
That is correct, and I would just note that when you look, I'm trying to find the page, it is, currently the single filing is 3,500, but the married filing status is 8,000. So it's a little less than half.
So that's why the increase on the single was 2, and then the inflation factor after that. So, yes. Any other questions, committee? Thank you, Amelia. Committee, our first conferee is Representative Count. Welcome to the Tax Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Committee, thanks for the opportunity to testify in favor of this Senate Bill 539. So it's my 4th year on tax on the House side, and I think you all know the process. We kind of watch what happens on a lot of these big bills, and we saw 169 last year fail. We saw 2284 fail this year, and I think we would, most of us would like to see a tax cut package passed this year. And so I've spent a little time trying to pay a little bit more attention to the big tax bill, and specifically paying attention to some of the concerns and objections to the 2 bills that have failed. I think it's very important. There's a lot of smart people who are hesitant for good reasons. And so listening to some of the objections and paying attention to the bills that are being floated around and this one being introduced, what I see in this bill is a respect for some of the concerns and objections, specifically the concern about who receives the benefit of the other bills that failed, the fiscal note on some of the prior bills, and also just the overall balance of the components in the tax bill. And this specific Senate bill, it addresses, one, the wants of a lot of people, the single rate, but also some of the concerns. And if we look at who really benefits, if we understand how the personal exemption comes into play and the significant increase in the personal exemption, which kind of offsets the 0 tax rate in 2284. But if you take a look at the math on who really benefits, it is the low and middle income. They receive the majority of the tax break in this bill. If you take a look at the fiscal note, I think it's fairly conservative based on where we're at in the state, and also looking at comparison to 2284. And if you take a look at all the components, there was certainly some hesitation on completely eliminating the income tax on Social Security, because that does specifically benefit the higher income earners. There was some hesitation from a few no votes on that. And so this just smooths that cliff out a little bit. But yeah, so I think I certainly would love to see a sales tax or a tax cut package passed this year. I think this is a great opportunity. And one, I think it's neat to watch the process. And this bill, you can almost say it was created by the process, respecting the objections and trying to really come up with a compromise that hopefully everybody can support. And the last little benefit is I've got a lot to do in June. And I certainly would like to get this passed during regular session so I can get back to my day job in June. Happy to stand for questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Committee questions?
If-
Yes,
May I address the comment about the standard deduction?
absolutely. And I'll ask you a couple questions on that if you, yes, please.
So Senator, the comment about the standard deduction there, there's a concern about raising the standard deduction. When we decoupled a couple years ago, allowing people to itemize, even if they took a standard deduction on the federal level, they can itemize on the state level. I think more people are itemizing, so the standard deduction is, the use of that might be decreasing a little bit. So not everybody uses a standard deduction. However, everyone benefits from the personal exemption, and seeing the increase in that and also tying that to CPI, as far as the low middle income and the families, there's a tremendous benefit to them with the personal exemption element to the bill. So that would be my take on it, just because there is a concern about the standard deduction maybe not going up. But if you include the personal exemption, it's a significant impact to low middle income, especially families.
Especially when you consider it's going from $2,250 to $11,000 for adult and then $3,000 per dependent. Representative, I do appreciate all your work on this. I know it was, I think that's well said, that it is a product of listening to people and trying to come up with the best solution. What would you say about the argument that this helps the rich? The last plan was attempted, one of the negative arguments, they said it was inaccurate, but it did say that it helped the rich. I would ask how you have addressed that, or how this has been addressed in this legislation.
I guess, first of all, it's complicated to take a look at a tax cut when a small percentage pay the majority of the income taxes. And so if we just focus on the income tax portion of it, being that the rate stays at the 5.7, and it's a very slow reduction over 5 years, and the increase in personal exemption, if you take a look at who has the impact on that, it's all low and middle income. Because there's an equal benefit from a person making a small, let's say, $50,000 to $80,000 a year to a person making $1 million a year. The impact on year one is the same. Each year with the increase in CPI of the standard deduction and the personal exemption, the low middle income receive a benefit. The high earners also receive a benefit. But in the out years, the high earners do receive a slightly higher benefit because of the rate reduction. But I think it's about $400 a year that a person making, let's say, $1 million a year would benefit. So it definitely front loads it and focuses on the low middle income and not the higher earners.
And I would say if inflation continues to increase as it is, it will be a benefit for the lower income earners because it is tied, that increase is tied to the CPI index. So committee, any other questions? Seeing none, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Committee, our next conferee is Nick Novelli. Welcome to the Tax Committee.
Okay, I've been in Kansas practicing as a CPA, doing tax returns since I established my practice in Wamego in 1989. Wamego is the area that my mother grew up. She was from the Waxman family out there near Flush and Louisville. And usually this time of year, I cannot keep up with what the legislature is doing because I'm working my 60 to 80-hour weeks doing tax work. Usually CPAs will say, well, who cares what the legislature is thinking? Let's just wait till they decide what they're doing, and then we'll learn how to apply those changes after the fact. Usually about July is when we start thinking about what has happened. Since I have sold my interest in my practice to a younger CPA, and have entered into this period of semi-retirement, I've had a greater interest and ability to keep up with the changes that are being proposed by the different legislative processes. So it was back earlier in the year, I was speaking with a couple of legislators about the ideas. I said, does anybody ever do calculations and show what the effect is for ordinary people? Because that's what I'm used to seeing is my client base has been from low-income people to high-income people. And what I did is this time is to look at the effect of this bill on a family of 4 in Kansas. And so you should have a spreadsheet that looks something like this in your packet. And so if you look at that, it's there's columns showing different income levels for this family of 4. So at the Kansas income line, there's a comparison of a $40,000 family, and then the $60,000 family, an $80,000 family, as well as an $850,000 family. Next, it shows taking the Kansas standard deduction for that family and taking the exemptions for the 4 people in that family and what the taxable income is. Following that down in the very first column, that family of 4 has a tax of $712. There is an earned income credit of $696, and they end up having a balance due of taxes of $16. At the federal level, and what I did in the columns that say 2023, I ran these, I still do some part-time work from my old firm, as I use that tax software to run the numbers for 2023, so I would check it against my spreadsheet. I also looked at what happens at the federal level. So if you keep going down, it's $40,000 of income at the federal level. The federal deduction is a standard deduction for that family. They have taxable income that is less than the Kansas taxable income. And they actually end up with a tax refund of $6,800 rather than owing $16 like they do the state of Kansas. It always interested me how low-income people in Kansas pay tax that they don't at the federal level. I also looked at what's happening in Missouri for that same family, Colorado, and Oklahoma for that same family. Those are those bottom 3 numbers in that first column. So Missouri is very similar with almost the same $15. Colorado has a very generous child tax credit like they do at the federal level, and a more generous earned income credit than we have in Kansas. And so they actually end up with a $4,000 refund in Colorado. Oklahoma, we do better than Oklahoma because that family would owe $393 in Oklahoma. So what does the effect of this bill have for this family with a $40,000 income and 2 children? That's in the second column. That's for Senate Bill 539. The taxable income drops to $4,000 because of the increased exemption that this bill provides for the family. That's the $22,000 for the couple plus the $3,000 for each child. So that's how you get to $28,000 for the exemption amount. They still have the earned income credit, and so now they get a refund rather than owing taxes. So their improvement to their taxes is going from $16 owed to a $468 refund. So that's an improvement of $484. I ran these same numbers. If you keep going across, just quickly, for the $60,000 family, the improvement is $243. They go from owing $1,600 to owing only $1,300. That family that has an $80,000 income, their improvement is $167. And then the family that has the $850,000 income, their improvement is also $168. So their benefit is a 0.4% benefit compared to the family with $60,000 of income whose benefit is a 15% reduction in their taxes. What's interesting is to compare the numbers that each of these families has under the new Senate Bill 529, which is that 2024 column for each of the 4 different income scenarios. If you compare that number to the other states in the area, For example, if you look at the family that is the $850,000 family, their Kansas tax is $46,398. In Missouri, it's $40,000. In Colorado, it's $35,000. And in Oklahoma, it's $39,000. So while it is always a concern, are we benefiting the rich? But in Kansas, we tax the rich more than we do in the nearby states. So it's an interesting comparison. And if you would like me to give you, in the future, more of an analysis on some of these things, I'd be glad to do that and work with you if there's a chance to work with you on these things. So that's what I've done, is to compare these families, or this one family under these different income scenarios. I think that the bill is a good bill, and it's one that you should consider approving because it does benefit all of our families, especially the low-income families.
Thank you. Would you be willing to stand for questions?
If there are some questions.
I think I see a couple. Senator Reddy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for this information. I understand the standard deduction exemption and the tax table. Where exactly is the line for their tax rate on here? Am I missing that?
Okay, the tax rate is under the new bill, it's the 5.7% so if you take the taxable income of $4,000 for the family with the $40,000 income, the $4,000 times the 5.7% is $228. They have the exemption, the earned income credit of $696, and they end up with a refund instead of owing money. The family that has the $60,000 gross income, their taxable income is $24,000. The rate is 5.7% under the House Bill 539. So that would be, I'm sorry I didn't put the rates on here. I have them in my spreadsheet, but I was trying to make it not have too many numbers on it, but I can do better the next time.
One more question, if you don't mind.
Senator Reddy.
Thank you. So this is for 5.75 is what I hear you saying.
5.7.
5.7, but that's what's in 539. I don't know if it's possible, but I would like to see what it is for the current rates as well. I don't know how, I just want to see the differences. If everything else is the same as far as the standard deductions and everything else, what that would look like.
So if we were to keep the rates at the rates that they are now,
Yes.
and
And everything else being equal.
Senator, that is the first column in the spreadsheet. And we can get you the current rates. The 30,000 and less, it's 3.1. Above 30,000 is 5.25. 60,000 and above is 5.7.
No, I understand the rates. I meant with everything else that's in the packet, in addition to the rates.
so I think what you're saying, let me see if I understand your question, is if you were to take, for example, for the family of 40,000, if you applied for the current rate structure, then the rate would be 3.1% on that $4,000 rather than the 5.7%. And that would reduce their tax further, is what it would do. They are getting the benefit of that higher exemption. And so that is what provides them with some tax relief. Even though their rate is now 5.7%, their total tax is lower because of the combination of the higher rate, but the even higher exemption. And so that way it comes out for them.
So, and just to be clear for the committee, as always, good questions, Senator. The column that says 2023, each one of those columns is current statute. That is the current standard deduction, the current personal exemption. And if you have any questions, yes.
And it would have the 3.1%
Yes.
rate for the different people.
So my question was, if we had the three brackets, but in addition to, because part of the 539, one of the components is the tax rate, but there are several other components to that. So I was wondering what it would be with all the other components with the tax breaks that we have now, with tax brackets that we have now. Just a question, just wondering about that.
No, that's fine. We want to make sure we get you an answer, Senator. So we will we'll discuss that with research and make sure that we get your question answered. Thank you. Committee,
You want me
any
to do a
other?
spreadsheet? I can.
No, you're, okay, we may ask you, but committee, any other questions? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a quick question. I really appreciate this graph. This really helps everyone understand. Did you run something like this for the legislation we had earlier in this year? House Bill 20
I did, but it's on some computer that I'd have to go look for.
provided. I was just curious. And a comment which I really appreciate, it still shows that Kansas is taxing the higher income much more than than other states are. So we're still disincentivizing our wealthy people to live or come to or stay in Kansas because our tax rates are higher. And so I appreciate you really putting this.
I think it shows you what if someone lived on one side of the state line versus in Kansas City, for example, where their taxes would be with those numbers there.
We're in Coffeyville and South Coffeyville.
Right.
That's Oklahoma and Kansas. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Committee, any other questions? Thank you very much. Committee, our next conferee is Grover Norquist via WebEx. Welcome to the Tax Committee.
Sorry, it took a moment to unmute there. Madam Chairman, thank you, Chairman Tyson and committee. Appreciate the opportunity. I run Americans for Tax Reform, which was an organization put together by President Reagan to support the 1986 Tax Reform Act, which brought taxes down to two rates from many rates to make it simpler and more transparent. And we support at the national level, as well as in the 50 states, more transparent taxation, simpler, easy to understand, moving towards a single rate. And the good news is I'm certainly supportive of Senate Bill 539 or any version of that moves to a single rate tax. And that's something that the country is doing as a whole. There are today 21 states that have a single rate on their income tax, just one rate. And 14 of those have a single rate that's not zero. 7 of them have a single rate that is zero, but 21 have a single rate. And states are moving towards that. Recently, Mississippi has gone to a single rate. Georgia, Arizona, and Idaho have all moved to a single rate tax. Our friends in North Dakota and Ohio have both moved to 2 rates on the way to 1 rate. And looking at the states around Kansas, Iowa started at a top rate of 8.99%, almost 9% total. And now they're tied with Kansas at 5.7%, and they're moving to a single rate tax of 3.99%, almost 4% by 2026. And Colorado, also nearby, is a single rate state. They are at 4.4%, and they've been moving lower as they have a spending limit there, the Tabor spending limit, which has allowed tax rates to come down as well. Illinois, a state that surprises some. It is a single rate tax. It is under 5% single rate tax. And in 2020, on the same day that Joe Biden won the presidential race in Illinois by 16 points, on the same ballot was a question: would you like to go to a graduated income tax, a progressive income tax, away from the single rate tax that Illinois has? The governor of that state, a Democrat, spent $50 million, he's very rich, $50 million to try and convince Illinois taxpayers we should have many rates, not 1 rate. And that was voted down with a 9-point margin, So it is not only is it increasingly popular to get to a single rate tax, it attracts business, it attracts individuals, it gives you simplicity and transparency in your tax code, but it's also politically popular. And citizens are saying we don't want to go away from a single rate tax, we actually want to go towards it. Nebraska also is higher than Kansas right now, but it's also going to the top rate of 3.99 by 2027, phasing that in. So around the country, more and more states are going to a single rate tax. Candidates are running on that commitment in governor's races. Certainly the governor of Arkansas made that commitment to get to a single rate tax. The candidates looking to be governor in Missouri have also said that's where we want to get to a single rate tax. So it makes it easy for people to understand what their taxes are. They don't have to worry. When we moved from 9 rates, 7 or 9 in North Dakota down, it was very confusing to get to the 2 rates, and people wondered about who was what. But once you get to a single rate, it's very easy for people to say, we're now going to raise everyone's taxes to pay for some new idea, or we're also going to reduce everybody's taxes because the government has been a good steward of your money. And so it's very clear what's happening in a state. I do want to commend Senator Ty Masterson and Speaker Dan Hawkins for their leadership on this over the years, and Representative Chris Croft and many others. But Kansas, in moving to a single rate, is in good company around the country. A little late to the game, but not too late. There are a series of states that are just a little bit behind you, and it may take them a year or 2 to get there. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? And I would remind the committee, this legislation, single rate, was introduced first in 2017, both by a Democrat and by a Republican, just 2 different rates. So it's not new to the conversation, but it has gotten further than we ever have before. So committee, any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Grover, for testifying.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else that would like to testify as a proponent? Committee, did you have another statement? Do you want to come to the microphone, please, and state your name again? Thank you.
So I'm Nick Novelli again. Senator Reddy, okay, had asked about if we had kept the rates the same. So I ran the numbers on that spreadsheet. And if you have that spreadsheet back out, the $484 improvement for the family with 40,000 would be $612 instead. And the $168 improvement for the family with the 850,000, they would have $1,083 improvement instead. So if you were to keep the rates the same, that would actually benefit the more wealthy more than it would benefit the less wealthy.
Thank you. Committee, I'll draw your attention to written testimony. There's some really good charts and information in that. Is there anybody that would like to testify as an opponent? Oh, we did have one other conferee WebEx. I'm sorry. Eileen Spickler. Is she online?
Can you hear me and see me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. My name's Eileen Spickler, and I am a constituent of Senator Tyson, and I've had the privilege of meeting her several times at the Franklin County Legislative Coffees, and I thank you for the opportunity to bring this up. This is a very complicated issue just in general for me, and I struggle with it because I'm poor. I got vulnerable, and I just put my income information in my testimony, and I revealed a lot of personal things, and I realized this is part of the public record, and it is what it is for now. I'm concerned about how it's going to affect me. It sounds like, from what I'm hearing, that it's been changed enough that it is going to help someone who, like me, who makes $52,000, who has a combined income right now of $52,000 a year until I can finish school. And even then, it's going to be a while before I can make any kind of decent money. But it's just running the numbers. I was concerned. I don't know, having heard what I've just heard, how valid my numbers are now. But we struggle financially a lot. And we don't have a whole lot of money to put into savings. A lot of our income goes to food, it goes to gas for our car, and it goes to medical copays because we have outrageous medical copays for our insurance. And we pay a lot for insurance. It's crazy. And
So Eileen,
I'm
do you have any
concerned.
comments on the bill? We are running short on time again.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm concerned and I would like to know where I can find out more information about this. So I
Okay,
could,
so there is ks.legislature.org
I've
website.
been there, the tax, unfortunately, the fiscal notes weren't attached to that, so I couldn't read them until this morning when they were
Okay.
emailed to me.
Okay, well, I can get in touch with you, Eileen, and I can provide you more
Thanks. I
information.
appreciate that. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Thank you. Thank you, committee. Is there any opponents? Seeing none, committee, I will draw your attention to written opponent testimony. Are there any neutral? Seeing none, committee, we're going to close the hearing on Senate Bill 539, and I will make a couple of comments. Eddie, would you mind handing out, or having John hand out, the comparison between 539 and 2284? We do have the fiscal information on that. Eddie's spent quite a bit of time putting information together. I did notice there's some charts on Dave, the Kansas Policy Institute, that they spent quite a bit of time on. There's other charts in here. I recommend that the committee look at this. We will be working this legislation tomorrow. Committee, I did want to pick up, we do need to work a couple of bills. I guess we'll start out with the heavy lift. Well, let's go ahead and start with an easy one. That always helps kind of get us in rhythm. So let's start with Senate Bill 311. We're going to test your memory a little bit, committee. Amelia, do you mind giving us an overview?
Madam Chair, Senate Bill number 311 relates to property taxation and would provide for the exclusion of 1031 exchange transactions as indicators of fair market value. The bill would amend 79503A to provide that the sale price or value at which a property sells or transfers ownership in a Federal Internal Revenue Code Section 1031 exchange shall not be considered an indicator of fair market value, and that 1031 exchange transactions shall not be used as comparable sales for valuation purposes, nor as valid sales for purposes of the sales ratio studies. And this was a bill from last year. The committee did recommend that the bill be passed, and the bill was re-referred on January 8th back to the committee.
And since it was re-referred, we're going to take this opportunity to address some of the language and clarify it. So committee, you're being handed out text or a balloon amendment, and I am going to make that in the form of a motion. Amelia, will you describe the amendment, please?
Madam Chair, on the front of the balloon is a reflection to reflect the amendment in the title, but if you turn to the back, page 2, you will see that the motion would include build-to-suit transactions as well as sale-leaseback arrangements to the provisions of the bill, that those would not be considered as indicators of fair market value.
Thank you, Amelia. So committee, what we're trying to do here is to clarify that there are certain business transactions that should not be included in property tax evaluations. So we're just trying to clarify that language and make sure that it doesn't happen in the future. So with that, I will move my amendment. Is there a second on it? It's been moved by Senator Tyson, seconded by Senator Peck. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. We're back on the bill. Committee, what are your wishes on the bill? Committee, we're not going to move on this today. We're going to go ahead and turn our attention. We'll move on it tomorrow to finish the bill out. I just want to make sure that everybody gets a look at it since it was last year. We want to make sure. Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Eddie, could you remind me, who are the conferees that came and testified for this bill?
There was a gentleman who is a representative of, I believe, Qdoba franchises, and then the Secretary of Revenue also spoke to the subject matter.
Okay, thank you.
Good memory, Eddie. It was Mr. Estes that did testify. Committee, we're going to go ahead so that you have the evening to look at this, and then we'll finish working it tomorrow, but let's turn our attention to Senate Bill 509. Amelia, will you give us an overview?
Madam Chair, Senate Bill number 509 was heard last week, I believe, if you recall. Hopefully, you may still have your packet. It relates to income tax and would establish the Education Opportunity Tax Credit commencing with tax year 2024 for resident individual taxpayers with eligible dependent children not enrolled in public school. The amount of the credit would be 75% of the base aid for a dependent child enrolled during the tax year in a private school accredited by the State Board of Education or a regional or national accrediting agency, or in an amount of 50% of the base aid for a dependent child enrolled in a non-accredited private school. The tax credit would be refundable, as well as there would be a process for an application to receive the credit in advance. And the bill would act from and after publication in the Register, and I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Amelia. Any questions? Seeing none. Committee, what are your wishes on the bill? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I do have a balloon amendment that I would ask for staff to hand out. Do you want me to wait till it's handed out? Okay, I'll go ahead and start with the explanation. You will see on the amendment that there are several different balloons. I will go through those quickly because they're fairly simple. One would place a cap, a $75 million cap on the program with automatic increases as needed. So in other words, if the program is very successful and we need additional money, this would reduce the fiscal note. That's the reason that I'm putting the $75 million cap into place. This would reduce the fiscal note. So that is first balloon, and then you will notice down below that, the next, I don't want someone double dipping. If a student already receives the tax credit for low-income student scholarship, if they're participating in that program, don't want them to receive scholarship for their schooling and then also receive a tax credit. So this just makes certain that there is no double dipping. And then the next balloon, there you'll notice letters, that's just correcting the letters and making them match. Then the next balloon on page 2 inserts the word public school. That just sort of matches on line 36, page 1, where it says public school. The next balloon relates directly to the question that I asked during the hearing, and this establishes a penalty. So if someone receives the tax credit and then ultimately decides they do not or to not send their child to the private school, but they send them to a public school, this provides a penalty so that we can get the money back, the Department of Revenue can get the money back. I think these are fairly straightforward, but Madam Chairman, I will be glad to answer questions, or if it's proper now, I can make a motion, or we can discuss the balloon and then I can make the motion.
Senator, it's as you wish.
All right, I will go ahead and make a motion that we amend with, no, I'll wait just in case there's No,
Go ahead and make the motion, but are you making the motion for all of the changes at once, or do you want to dispose of them?
I like them all.
Okay. Well, then you've heard the motion. Committee, is there a second on the motion? It's been moved by Senator Peck, seconded by Senator Erickson. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, Senator, all those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. We're back on the bill. Any discussion? Senator Corson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. You know, I've struggled with this bill when we had it last year, and I think it was 128 last year, if I'm remembering correctly. My challenge with this bill, in part, is that there's really no guardrails on the bill at all. I mean, this is the only tax credit program I'm aware of where people just get the full amount of the credit, whether it's 75% or 50%, without showing that they paid any tuition at all, that they incurred any expense. It goes to really wealthy families as well as not wealthy families. So I'm really just concerned about the lack of any real conceivable guardrails on the program. It's not something that we typically have done, to my knowledge, with other tax credit programs. And my other challenge with this bill is that I'm unsure kind of what the public policy goal is. Like, how will we know if this is successful? Is the goal that we want to have fewer kids in public schools and more kids in private and home schools? I mean, is that the goal? Because if that's the goal, then in some ways I would think that this is actually not generous enough, because I don't know that these amounts that the families would receive if you currently can't afford private or homeschool, I don't know that this is going to be a tipping point. So to me, this bill has always kind of seemed like a real just kind of a pat on the back and like a attaboy, like, thank you for getting your kids out of these public schools, and here's this money because the state really wants to thank you for doing that, more than anything that to me is going to have like a tangible policy outcome. And I just don't know how we would measure success or failure. Thank you.
Any other comments, committee? Seeing none, Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would move that the Senate Assessment and Taxation Committee pass Senate Bill 509 as amended favorably.
Is there a second on the motion? It's been moved by Senator Peck, seconded by Senator Erickson. Discussion on the motion. Well, committee, you always know my concerns about refundability, and I'll just make that comment. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no? No. Okay, motion carries, and Senator Holland, Senator Corson, and Senator Reddy would like to be recorded as a no vote. Committee, there's no other business before us today. We will be working bills again tomorrow. Thank you for your work.